They say the Wendigo is born from hunger and madness, a spirit that feeds on fear until nothing human remains. Hello, friend, and welcome to Torches, Yoga, and Mindfulness. I'm Lauren, and today I have for you the sixth installment of our Stillness in the Dark Mindful Horror series, where we are exploring survival, shadow, and presence. This story follows Mara, a woman embarking on a 7-day solo stretch of the Appalachian Trail. But for this trip, she carries more than a pack. She carries grief. And as the forest grows darker, she'll be tested not by the weight on her back, but by the weight inside, learning the power of skill 6, finding stillness in the storm of her own mind. Mara adjusted the straps of her pack and glanced back at the winding trail that disappeared into the trees. It was her third day on the Appalachian Trail, though time had already felt stretched, measured less in hours than in footsteps, breath, and the way shadows shifted across the forest. Out here, silence pressed differently. It wasn't the hollow silence of her apartment, or the aching pause when she forgot for just a second that her husband was gone. This silence was alive, a breathing, watchful quiet that lived in the soil and canopy. She'd told people she wanted solitude, that she needed space, but the truth was more simple than that. She didn't know what else to do. The payout from his life insurance had been sitting untouched, heavy in her account like an angry reminder, a gift paid for absence. Every time she checked her balance, she thought of the cost. So she came here, with boots and borrowed gear, hoping the trail would take what grief had left behind. The first days had been manageable. Her legs ached, her shoulders burned, but there was a strange comfort in the pain. It was proof she was moving, not just existing. She ate granola by the handful, boiled instant coffee over a camp stove, and tried to write in her journal at night, though most of the pages blurred into tear stains and unfinished sentences. Once she'd whispered into the dark, "I'm still here," and the forest had answered only with the drone of insects and chirping birds. But Mara had noticed last night that the insects had quieted, not just a little, but entirely. Not a single cicada, not a call of a crow, or an owl's hoot at night. The winds in this new area she arrived to were unnaturally quiet, as though something vast had stepped into the trees and hushed all the creatures. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The only thing more prevalent than the silence was the overwhelming sense that she was being watched. She could feel eyes at her back no matter where she turned. That night, she sat by her fire, the crackling wood music to her ears, a comfort that wasn't a moment too soon. She felt like she was going to drown in the silence. Mara lay in her tent listening, her body rigid and her heartbeat thumping. Laying there in the silence of the forest, she heard a branch snap off in the distance, then another and another, rhythmic. She started to analyze the sound, much too large to be a deer or a small nocturnal critter. There were known to be bears in the area, but she hadn't seen signs of any on her way to the Sarver Hollow shelter that she was staying in now. She told herself it was nothing, just dead limbs falling, thinking that they maybe just sounded so loud since there were no insect sounds. And she reminded herself that she'd only been getting a few hours sleep a night for the last month or so, and it surely had to be taking its toll. The nightlife of the forest didn't come out that night, but something else did. As she lay there trying to find sleep, she thought she heard people talking, far enough away that she couldn't make out their words, just the sound of people chattering. Just when she had almost convinced herself it must be some animal or the wind, a maniacal laughter pierced the night air. She panicked. She didn't want to come out of the tent to confront it, but she also knew the tent would not protect her if whatever that was approached the shelter. She hoped she was invisible, Her mind raced to thoughts of her family, then jumped to thoughts of fear, wondering if this was the same type of fear her husband felt. The chattering grew closer, and then she could hear its steps circling the shelter. She couldn't tell if it was the forest putting her on edge or if it was her own anxious spiral. Every time she closed her eyes, she had to relive the days following the accident. The wake, the funeral, all the voices from other people telling her how to move. Each time, it was like it was happening all over again, fresh and vibrant, painful and lonely. When she opened her eyes, she could see a shadow, a form passing back and forth in front of the open doorway of the shelter. She held her breath until her lungs were on fire, pleading with her for a precious morsel of oxygen. Slowly, she inhaled. The air smelled toxic. Listening for a change in the shadow's pace, wondering if it hurt her, she exhaled. The steps seemed to fade. A small branch snapped in the distance, not far away, but far enough to confirm that the visitor had gone and moved along. No more voices, no more pacing. She sat frozen in her tent the rest of the night, waiting for daybreak. She did doze off for a few minutes, but visions of what could have been in the woods that night flooded her dream. The next morning, after her cup of instant coffee, Mara started to pack up her site. Moving around her site and shelter, she didn't see any tracks besides hers. And as grateful as she was to have had the shelter for the night, staying in the small cabins always made her feel uneasy, like she was already cornered before anything could happen. She was looking forward to the coming night when she knew she would be able to duck off the trail and tuck herself into a nice wooded area for cover and a sense of security. She had hung her food high in a tree about 40 yards from her campsite. With everything else packed up, she headed to go retrieve it. As she approached the tree, her stomach churned, but not out of hunger. The tree had massive gouges, not gouges, claw marks, reaching what had to be 15 feet up the trunk and jagged. Her rope was shredded. Quickly looking around for her food bag, she didn't really expect to see it still be there, but it was tossed gently not far from the base of the tree, like whatever it was that started going for it changed its mind. She grabbed her food bag, tucked it in her pack, as she thought to herself that the beast must be just as tired of granola as she was. Mara pushed further down the trail that afternoon, the pack digging into her shoulders. The sun burned hot overhead, but the air at the forest floor was chilled. Her mind raced between panic of what she was supposed to do with her life now, or who she was, then to trying to bring awareness to the present moment. Every time she noticed her stride, her boots' rhythm on the ground, or her breath, or when she would intentionally notice the shapes and textures of the trees, she would see it out of the corner of her eye. Shadows darting between the trees. She would hear leaves crunch or limbs snap. She would catch herself starting to anchor to the moment, but then she'd be wildly searching around, looking over her shoulders and quickening her pace. Each time, she's sure she would see another hiker or at worst a bear, but always there was nothing. Silence and trees. The feeling of being watched had been carried over from the day before. The daylight hadn't brought back the insects or birds, and the atmosphere was electric. It was late afternoon, and Mara was straining to hear, standing still and silent on the trail after having heard a large limb break. She was telling herself that it was just a tree shedding last summer's growth. A crow cawed in the distance, and her chest sank in relief, her first full exhale in hours. She started walking again, letting the crow's call keep her tethered to the present. But as she walked on, the bird's chatter changed. It worked. It screeched and it cackled, and its echo sent waves of tension up Mara's spine. Her rational mind whispered explanation, wind tunnels, echoes in the mountains, but her gut said otherwise. Next thing she knew, she was in a full-on power walk. She was another day out from the next town. She was just ready to get out of this holler and over the ridgeline. The sun started to dip behind the western ridge. The shadows stretched long, offering more camouflage for the beast stalking her, and antler-like branches bending though the air was still. The more she tried to dismiss them, the more they seemed to appear. Once, she swore she saw a pair of eyes peeking through the underbrush, pale and luminous. Mara froze, heart hammering. But when she focused on the spot where they were, the eyes vanished. She felt like something was playing with her. Evening was quickly approaching, and by the time she found a flat stretch of ground that felt relatively safe, her nerves were fried. Her hands shook as she lit a small fire, and she kept her knife and bare mace close by, reminding herself to breathe, slow and deep. But each time she inhaled, the silence around her seemed to inhale with her, drawing in her breath, her fear, as if feeding on it. She set up her sleeping bag against the rock face, not wanting to go for the tent and feel even more trapped. The mountain protecting her on two sides, she opted for a simple dinner that night of jerky and a power bar, not wanting to cook and further attract the wildlife. As she laid back against the rock, resting her head on her jacket, she felt her exhausted body melt into the warm rock. She felt like the mountain was offering not just protection, but its strength and its steadiness. In this moment, she found the support she'd been missing. She found peace in her breath and gently drifted off to sleep. A few hours later, she was jolted out of her dream. She couldn't quite tell if the shriek that had nearly stopped her heart was in the dream or if it had come from the forest. She scanned all around her. Her fire was only a small pile of coals. She tossed some nearby twigs on it to bring it back to life. As the little fire started to crackle, she noticed some of the crackling was coming from around her. She held her breath, listening. Twigs were breaking out in the distance, coming from the basin of the holler. It was only around midnight and hours before the sun would be coming up, so packing up and heading out into the darkness was not an option. She listened as the snaps, cracks, and rustles grew louder and closer until she could hear the slow, deliberate pattern. Footsteps. Too large and heavy to be a raccoon or deer again. And she had heard from other campers that bears are good at being sneaky and have almost a silent step. Her chest tightened and breathing became increasingly difficult. She realized she was breathing so loud now she couldn't even hear the pacing steps. She clapped her hand over her mouth to stifle it. As she got her breath under control, the pacing seemed to have settled somewhere off to the left. Her back still protected by the mountain, she pressed herself harder against the rock, wishing it would just open up and swallow her, taking her away from whatever it was that has been hunting her. That's when the mimicry started. At first, it sounded like an angry cat, growly and guttural, but calling to her with drawn-out cries. Slowly, the voice morphed and twisted, mimicking her husband's voice. Her throat closed. It's not him, it's not him, it's not him. She shook her head like she was trying to shake away the sound. But the voice grew louder, warped, and stretched into a rasping growl, exclaiming, "Mara, don't leave me here." She curled into herself. Every fiber of her being was drenched in terror. She wanted to scream, to run, to just escape the sound, but with every wave of panic that pulsed through her, the pacing grew heavier, closer, the presence swelling against the light of her fire. It was feeding on her grief and fear. The fire snapped, sending sparks into the night air, but even their glow felt swallowed by the dark. Mara pressed her palms into the dirt, trying to steady herself as the mimicry twisted and deepened, overlapping itself until it sounded like dozens of voices all talking to her at once. Her husband, her mother, strangers, all pulling her deeper into her spiral. From the corner of her vision, something loomed against the tree line. She turned her head before she could stop herself, and this time it didn't dart away or hide. It didn't disguise itself. A figure towered just beyond the circle of firelight, its body wrong with awkward joints, the face and head long like a deer. Gaunt, emaciated limbs hung at impossible angles, yet even in its unnatural way, it moved with slow, deliberate control, inching its way closer to her, one tree at a time. Its head lowered, crowned with twisted antlers that scraped against the branches above. The pale glint she'd seen following her along the trail, eyes, twin orbs glowing faintly, not with life, but with infinite hunger. It kept its gaze on her, and likewise, she couldn't move her eyes from it, her brain almost refusing to understand it. Her chest seized. She tried to scream, but only a dry rasp clawed out of her throat. The Wendigo shifted, one step forward, taloned fingers curling as though it meant to peel the world open. Every rational thought splintered. She grabbed her knife, brandishing it with a shaky hand, but the blade looked absurdly small compared to the enormity before her. The creature hissed a long exhale, its steaming breath turning the air rancid like rotting sweat and decay. Her heart pounded, her lungs burned. The darkness seemed to be closing in on her vision, and she stumbled, almost falling into the fire. Just past the tree line, it leaned closer, craning its neck, its jaw unhinged, gaping, its mouth open. The mimicry poured out, this time its voice low and broken, the words that haunted her ever since the accident. You lived, you left me. This sound split her open. Mara's sobs broke free, and as it did, the Wendigo swelled, bones cracking, shadows thickening. It fed, stretching taller, heavier, closer. Her panic spiraled, and the edges of her visions blurred, her body locking up between the instinct to run and the knowledge that she couldn't escape. The Wendigo's claws scraped the rock face behind her head, gouging stone as easily as wood. Its face leaned down into the circle of firelight now, skull-like, with patches of skin hanging in strips, its jaw yawning wider than it should have been able to, its glowing eyes pinned on her like prey. Her terror was complete, and it had never looked more real. Mara's whole body quaked. She could feel her bones shaking and her muscles setting like concrete. Her knife slipped from her grip, clattering uselessly against the stone. She couldn't look away from its eyes, cold, bottomless, alive with her panic. She realized then, with a terrible clarity, that the more she trembled, the more it grew. Each sob, each ragged breath, seemed to thicken its form, freed its bones, draw muscle across its frame. It was becoming whole. Her mind screamed at her to run, to flee into the dark, and just to throw herself down the trail. But another part of her, a part that was buried beneath the waves of terror. She remembered the words from therapy, the nights she had tried to stave off panic attacks in her apartment. Fear is fuel. Don't give it more fire. Breathe. Anchor. Her lungs heaved like she was drowning. She pressed her back into the mountain and closed her eyes, grateful for the reprieve from its gaze. One breath, her chest rose, shaky but steady enough. 2. The voices twisted around her, trying to pull her back into grief, into guilt. You should have been the one. 3. Her body wanted to convulse, to break apart, but she exhaled slowly, deliberately, the way her husband used to when he tried to calm her. 4. The claws stopped scraping. The weight of its breath hesitated. She opened her eyes, the Wendigo flickering. Its shape jittered as though it was withering away along with the dying fire. It snarled, lurching forward, but when her fear spiked, she caught it, she caught herself. Her eyes closed again. No, I won't feed you. She repeated it like a mantra. She inhaled once more, longer this time, letting her body melt into the rock behind her. Exhaled, released the grief's grip on her chest. The forest stirred for the first time in so long, small at first. Crickets chirped in the distance, an owl hooted. Even the yap of some coyotes brought a comfort of their own. The world breathing with her. When she opened her eyes again, the Wendigo was thrashing, its body collapsing inward, limbs withered, shadows tearing apart like smoke. It shrieked, not in triumph, but in anguish of a denied hunger. Retreating into the trees, dissolving into the dark until Mara could not pick it apart from the branches of the forest. The fire popped. A breeze moved through the branches. The air smelled of pine again, not rot. Mara's whole body sagged. Tears streamed freely, but they weren't terror anymore. She felt the mountain's steadiness at her back, the rhythm of her breath filling the silence. The grief was still there, the loneliness, the questions, but they were hers to carry, not fuel for the dark. She whispered into the night, voice trembling, but steady. I am still here. The forest answered this time. No more silence, small living sounds of the world. Mara wiped her face, stoked the fire, and leaned into the rock once more. When sleep finally found her, it was not in fear, but in a fragile, hard-won calm. All right, my friend, that is my story for you this week. Mara's story shares her battle with the cryptids and within herself. She had thought when she lost her husband, she had also lost her strength, but really it never left her. Buried under grief and fear, yes, but not gone. She found it in her breath, and she found the beast was no match for her calm. So, friend, I ask you, what strength is already within you, quietly waiting to be remembered? Before you go, if you love spooky season like I do, make sure you tap the like and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this series. Friend, thank you so much for sharing a piece of your day with me. Stay present, stay kind to yourself, and I will see you soon.